And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out. Hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine. Only on the BetQL network.
And I believe, my friend, Brendan Tobin, we are now officially 1 hour away. Tell me exactly what time that game tips.
They claim it's tips at 8:32. I tend to believe them.
32? Okay, well then we're 50.
Usually it's ESPN that fudges the tip-off numbers. I don't think TNT is that different tonight.
Yo, you can't just give me like a top of the hour. You can't just give me like a 30 or a 15. A 32.
Very weird.
Get out of town.
They were trying to get everybody those bold thoughts on the pregame show, dude.
Coming up in a little while, Brendan and I are going to lace them up and fight each other. And don't worry, we will talk a little bit of basketball because I think his Miami Heat might just be dead. But I'm not saying that right now. We'll save that for the next segment. Right now, this is a little underrated. All right, so I'm going to give you a fighter and take everything into account. We'll have a little bit of fun with this. Obviously, for a guy like Conor McGregor, he's a promoter. He does all these different things. And then he's also a fighter. So take everything into account. We talk about this. Let's start with Daniel Cormier, 22-3 overall. Of course, he really lost twice to John Jones, but only one of those counted. And then he lost twice to Stipe Miocic. Fought in 12 title fights. Overrated or underrated when I say the name Daniel Cormier?
I'd go underrated because I feel like he took too much heat for losing to the best fighter of all time. And, you know, to be fair, I mean, John Jones was juiced to the gills too, so lost to a guy that was definitely cheating as well. So I think that DC takes a little bit too much crap for the crying memes and things like that. Plus, he's a hell of a broadcaster. I mean, the guy is really, really good on the mic.
I can't believe you're saying this. I feel like you've taken I'm always the one that brings that up, and you go, no, it doesn't matter. Everybody was dirty at the time, and who cares and all that. So, all right, cool. Yeah, no, you're right. And officially, right now, DC's record is, like I said, 22-3. It's crazy that he fought in that many title fights, but I've got a guy who actually fought in 4 more title fights. Believe it or not, he fought in 16 of them. He won 13 of them. And his name is Jose Aldo Jr. Overrated or underrated?
Overrated because a lot of people say he's the featherweight GOAT, and he's not. Conor McGregor is.
Oh, goodness. Here we go. Now we're going to have a whole conversation about this again, about how I just told you that he defended his belt 13 separate times and Conor McGregor defended it a grand total of 0. A bagel, zilch, never, nothing.
How many times
never
did he defend
it? 13.
Oh, like the 13 seconds he lasted with Conor McGregor.
Okay. You set me up pretty good there, my guy. Knockout. Good on you, although you're still wrong. I mean, you're clever, but you're wrong. To disrespect Jose Aldo the way that you do, and especially
him.
The reason that you always go back to the well, and yeah, you're right. He did get knocked out. It did take 13 seconds, but we didn't. It's kind of like this, okay? And I'm being serious here. Everybody talked about how John Jones is back and he became the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter and all that. Are we sure? We didn't see that much of him. I know what we saw was really impressive, but I would have preferred to see like 12, 13, 14, 15, 22 minutes getting the championship rounds. Then I would be like, dude, he's completely back. But what did we see? And that was like 3 minutes against Cyril Gane. We saw 13 seconds. I'm not holding that against Jose Aldo Jr., and he might just be the best.
I don't understand the point here, though. Like, if you win a fight in 13 seconds or you win a fight in 3 minutes, why do you need to be dazzled over 22? Like, they don't get paid for overtime. I don't really understand why are you less impressed with a fight that doesn't last as long? Or why does it mean less to you? It's not more
or less impressed, per se. It's just maybe I don't know. If you were in there like we've seen, Gaethje and Chandler and some of these guys get in just these absolute wars for a long time, and you're getting hit and you're hitting back, then I get a chance to really break you down as a fighter. In the case of that one, it's tough to hold that against Aldo too much, but you do it. So we move on. Let's go to Conor McGregor then. 22-6 overall. I don't know if you heard me say this earlier, but 0 title defenses. And this is one that I actually don't hold against him as much smack as I'm talking. He's 3-4 in his last 7 fights. But ultimately, you kind of look at some of the guys that he's fought. Now, I don't give him a whole lot of credit for the guys that he's beat. You mentioned the last one was Donald Cerrone, and Donald Cerrone was turning into ashes right in front of us. I think he lost 9 of his 10 final UFC fights. And I love Cerrone, but those are just the facts. Conor McGregor, his entire career encapsulated, overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
Really?
I'm gonna go underrated.
How's that possible?
Because you put entire career, and I think that I don't know if the sport's ever going to have anybody like him. I think that Francis Ngannou tried, and I just think that what he did is kind of a unicorn thing of the way that he was able to break away from the sport, the way he was able to convince Dana White. I don't know if anybody's ever going to do that again. Big reason why the promotion sold for as much as it did. So you put all that in the into the tumbler, and I just think it's a little hard to say that he's overrated.
Well, he's become a caricature of himself, both literally and figuratively, right? The way that he appears, the way that he acts outside the octagon and all of that. Now that you mention it, he was so big and so popular and so important to the promotion that when they did sell a few years ago, that's when he really should have cashed in and started his own thing. And I know he's still in the middle of fighting and figuring out his proper 12 and all that stuff. But I mean, ultimately, he was at a time as big as the promotion. I don't think he is that anymore. It'll be interesting to see how much his popularity comes back if he's able to beat Michael Chandler. Because to me, there's not really a whole lot Conor McGregor could do to ever get back to being Conor McGregor. Now, of course, his most famous, or at least one of them, rivals, Nate Diaz. Record, not going to blow you away. 22-13. Overrated, underrated. He fought everybody.
Wildly overrated.
What?
Wildly overrated. Wildly overrated.
You're lucky you're in Miami and I'm in Kansas City, bro. What are you talking about?
He's wildly overrated. I think that, he's got the coolest moment ever beating Conor McGregor, but like everything else is just kind of, him doing his Diaz brother thing. I know that they got a cult base, but like everything is always just like an explanation. It's always like, oh, I won the last 30 seconds of the fight. I won the fight. No, you didn't. Same thing with the losing to Jorge Masvidal. Oh, I was gonna turn it around, even though half my face has fallen off. Wildly overrated.
I mean, that's the whole thing. Chael Sonnen, undefeated, undisputed. Like, that's the game. He beat Leon Edwards, Nate. More people were talking about him at the end of the fight. That's how
the game isn't. The game isn't. Do you find him fascinating or unfascinating? You asked me, is the game overrated or underrated?
All right. Well, then I have a tough one for you. She went 12-2, but then she went out those last two pretty rough. Ronda Rousey, when you think about her career, overrated, underrated?
Underrated. She's one of the most.
I agree. Super important. Probably on the Mount Rushmore of importance.
Mm-hmm. No, you and I are on the same page. Yeah, no, I think it's wildly. And I honestly, though, for a sport that treats most of their fighters better for losing, I think she took way too much heat for losing to, a crazy head kick and then losing to the greatest person ever do it, in Amanda Nunes. Like who gets treated like they're a bum for losing to those two people?
Amanda wasn't quite the lioness that she's become just then, so it was kind of surprising. I mean, she came in as a huge, huge underdog. Amanda did. But in hindsight, yeah, we look back at it, we're like, okay, Amanda actually ended up being the better fighter, the best fighter when it comes to females. I agree with you. Ronda's importance. I mean, without her, who knows what we have on that side of things. What about Dom Cruz? 29-4. He went out 2-3 in his last 5. Fought in 10 separate title fights. Overrated or underrated when it comes to Dom Cruz?
I'm gonna go underrated because I feel like he's kind of lost in the pantheon of bantamweight, which has now become like such a great division. I don't think he gets the respect other guys do for the smaller divisions, even though he's on the broadcast and things like that. I don't think people realize how unorthodox he was for a fighter of that size.
Brock Lesnar.
What?
Brock Lesnar. I'm asking you.
That's your next guy. You don't have a.
No, I got a bunch. I want to run through them. That's why I got a couple minutes left, so I'm going speed.
Overrated.
Yeah, overrated. I'm with you there. Tony Ferguson.
Underrated.
That's a tough one.
Underrated.
What'd you go with?
Yeah, just underrated.
It's kind of like I said with Cowboy earlier. It hasn't been good lately. It was really good for a really long time. And actually, I would say Tony Ferguson's peak was even better than Cowboy. What did he have there when he was supposed to fight Khabib? What, he win 13 in a row, 14 in a row? It was ridiculous. And then, obviously, on his way out, it hasn't been quite so pretty. And then Michael Chandler kicked him in the face, and he looked like my grandfather, who passed away a couple of years ago. And that's what he looked like, by the way. What about that guy who did the kick, Michael Chandler? Overrated, underrated?
Oh man, that's a tough one because he had so much of his career not in the UFC. His UFC career hasn't gone fantastic as far as win and losses, but I think he's made a big impact. So I'd go underrated because he was basically the face of Bellator. Um, and then, since he's been in the UFC, he's been like in nothing but big headline fights since. So I would say one of the more underrated fighters probably the last 10 years.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, and I'd say that even though he has lost a couple of fights, his impact has been huge. He's become must-see TV. He's become main event in just the last couple of years. It feels like he's been around for much, much longer than that. How about a guy that we're going to see, well, in his next fight, taking on Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, overrated, underrated?
Little overrated because I actually think that he gets more shine for Poirier, even though Poirier is better at these wars. I don't know if it's just charisma or whatnot, but I think that it's funny. I think that they're very similar, but I think Poirier is better. But I think people look to Justin and think Justin's better, and I think that's just I think it's I don't know if it's the leg kicks, I don't know if it's the flip, I don't know what it is. So I'd actually go a little overrated.
Dustin Poirier, we both can agree, way underrated, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's crazy how underrated he is. Like if you wanted to talk about Dustin Poirier being a top 10 fighter of all time, that conversation could be had, or at least on the brink. He's kind of like Max Holloway when it comes to that. And I'm not saying that people don't give him respect. I'm just saying even though they do, he's still somehow underrated. That's how good of a fighter he is. So fun little conversation there. Overrated, underrated here on the BetQL network. Jimmy Butler has proven underrated. Well, at least during the regular season. We'll see what he ends up doing tonight. We're going to talk a little Jimmy when BT and I lace up the gloves. Coming up next, the segment is called You Gonna Fight Me? By the way, stay tuned after that. We talk boxing with Jim Rodriguez and then back into the smart cage. I almost said the octagon. Into the smart cage of the PFL. We finish off tonight's show with the voice of the PFL, Sean O'Connell. You're locked into the BetQL network.